everybody. I want to welcome you to Inside the Magic Circle, the interview section. And today I am talking to someone I'm very excited to speak with. Her name is Manny C. Price. She is a visionary and occult artist who I have been following for quite some time. And I think you were a little confused as to why I was even asking you to be on this when I asked you. But the truth is, I put out a list of, or a questionnaire asking for a list of people who people wanted to see, and a number of people said that they wanted to talk to occultists, or me to talk to occultists that aren't necessarily authors who are doing, you know, sort of like the occult, you know, personality teaching thing, but are just who are interested in occultists doing interesting things. And you were literally the first person that popped into my mind. And the reason that I know who you are in the first place is obviously because of Aaron Leach. We were doing that the 7-day Enochian masterclass a couple of years ago, and he said that he wanted to have you involved in it and somehow, and he showed me your beautiful spirit boxes, and I was like, oh, let's definitely you know, put that in. Unfortunately, we didn't end up selling that particular perk thing, but it was a great, yeah, I was really glad that you were part of it, and I wanted to like talk to you more about the stuff that you do and what it means to you. So to begin with, tell me a little bit about at what point, obviously you're an artist, and so you've been an artist your whole life. At what point did you start to combine occultism with your art? Was that all along, or something that came along at some point?
It came along some point. I was predominantly, obviously, commercial. I went to School of Visual Arts in from 2000 2005. I graduated BFA, and then I had MFA in computer art in 2007. And during that time period, I worked for, you know, like Curious Pictures and, you know, various companies, all the way to Don Dilworth and Bill Plimpton and Zygmunt Bauman, and with those basically in the animation industry, basically starting, you know, as we all do when we, you know, leave college, as interns and working our way up the ladder. From that point, I've always been into occultism and magic, mostly because of my mother and my grandmother. Kind of give you a little back history, and I say this in most interviews, is I'm on paper Roman Catholic, but my grandmother, my mother, they're Roman Catholic. It goes as far back. We're Puerto Rican, and she used to teach me when I was very young, and I used to ask questions. At that point, it was called Santeria. I know that recently, well, probably not recently, but they're kind of like, we refer to it as Lukumi, kind of just like, hey, Paulo is Paulo, Lukumi is Lukumi, and we kind of like say, this is it, and, you know, they're kind of, you know, making their identity a little bit more known, and like what's the do's and don'ts, and what the houses do. But anyway, in my particular house, we practice, you know, Sanse, we practice, you know, I have a boveda, my mom had a boveda, and... You just used two terms that I have the feeling that a good deal of my viewers are not going to have heard. Can you just give like a, you know, a tiny little definition? Sure. A boveda is basically an altar for me personally, because of my ancestry, or at least that was my madrina at the time had told me. Because you have to do divination, and you know, they do working into your history, and you know how to work with your spiritual court. So for me personally, I had to have the staircase, the 7-tier. Especially since my family was really rooted with the Orisha Yamaya. My grandmother used to, I remember when she, probably was like 5, 7. I remember when my mom used to drop me off with my grandmothers, that me and my sister would be like this on the table, and she's like, Mia, come here. And I'm like, what are you doing? And she's like, I got something to do for a client. And she would have us cut the cloths. It used to be red, black, and green. I remember those colors. And I don't know if there were mojo bags or what, but I remember that she used to put herbs, she used to put high john or various, you know, things into them, and then she would sew them up, put oils and everything, and she says, you put this in your brassiere. And they were chiquito, they were tiny. They weren't like these big things that I'm seeing people use. They were supposed to be inconspicuous, they were supposed to be small, not bothering you, and you place them on your body. And she would do this for people that, you know, when she did readings for, or people that were looking for help or whatever. My grandmother did this way until into her 80s.
Wow,
she
I mean,
recently,
that's quite an interesting family story. I mean, that's fantastic.
my mom, sorry.
No, but so what I'm curious about within that is that a significant amount of your of the art that I've seen of yours that has an occult feeling to it either has pop culture influences in, or has sort of goetic spirits. And I've seen some of the, like one of the mansions of the moon and stuff like that, which seems separate from that tradition, although I'm not totally certain. At what point did that sort of part of you know, sort of the, for want of a better word, sort of ceremonial or grimoire magic get more incorporated into what you were doing?
I guess when I was a teenager up until college, I was hanging out. Then Joe and Jezebel were working at enchantments, and I was learning about Thelema and Aleister Crowley, and basically the 101 basics of, you know, of witchcraft, or, you know, where do you start? This is the level. So that's basically, they had these circles. They were basically teaching classes.
Yeah. With your hands.
So I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay.
So
forward, I guess.
So yeah, I was practicing over there. I would talk with Joe and Jezebel. Eventually that blossomed into me doing my own, because I got into the Agrippa's philosophy books, and I got into the lesser and greater keys, and I was like, there's got to be more than this. I had this weird feeling of like, there's got to be more. And I was hitting the libraries, you know, this is, you know, just before the dawn of, you know, with the whole thing with the internet. We're talking like 97,
sure,
going into 2000.
I was in that period too, yeah.
So I'm just on that cusp of, like, you know, Amazon was not a thing yet, and you had to hit the bricks, you know, you had to go to the library, you actually had to go check for things and call out for things and have it, you know, just, you know, deposit at the library to pick it up and such.
There seems to be in occultism right now, there seems to be a little bit of a reversal back towards those sort of family traditions and you know, African diaspora sort of magical techniques are getting more and more sort of brought back in. Do you feel like you've kind of been in reverse a little bit, since you kind of were raised in that, you know, diaspora tradition, and have instead gone a little bit towards the more grimoire stuff? Not that there isn't grimoire in the ATR and in the diaspora stuff, because I've seen it in there a lot, but there it seems like your art at least has you know, started grappling with stuff that's kind of outside of that tradition, although with a little bit of that stylistic attitude to it. I mean, there is definitely a little bit of sort of you know, South American or, you know, Central American kind of influence in your art, just a little bit. Do you feel that way, or is that just me reading into it?
Well, I would, I think that's the Taino and the, you know, my Puerto Rican upbringing that you're probably feeling. Plus, you know, like I said, my background is so diverse. That's why I have my boveda set up the way it is, because my spiritual court is like from literally different spectrums. They're like every point of the continent, and everybody has to be separated and has to be treated as such. That was the other thing that when we were doing, you know, looking into my spiritual court and doing readings and such, especially with my madrina, my mother, you know, because like she was like aha moment, like, oh, that's why my daughter is into grimoires and, you know, these textbooks or whatever. And, you know, plus they go into the whole thing of like, I have one particular spirit that's next to me. He's a viejo, and you know, big viejito, that he's really, you know, into books, and he's very studious, and he's the one that's kind of been like, hey, you should check this out, you should check this out. And he was the one that actually led me into astrology, like, you know, William Lilly, and you know, going more into the group, and then finding the Picatrix. And when I started, that was the other thing going into that, plus I go to the Metropolitan, I go to the cloisters, and I see these exhibits, and I see the like things in, you know, how they were in medieval times or pre-medieval, and there's some boxes there. Like I recently just went to the cloisters that I wish I could show you know, viewers right now. I'll probably send you a link and a picture, but like some of the boxes where they have how do I segue this in? Because I know there's one book in particular that I'm thinking of, which it has the seal of Venus, and it has the day and the hour, and you know, it says basically it says in Latin, you know, that you make my bowels melt like wax. And it's made during the spring. And that particular one, I also, okay, so why am I saying that? Because there's this one box where in the cloisters that it looks similar to what I've been doing. And I'm like, okay, I'm picking up on something here.
Let me interrupt you for a second, because you're talking about your spirit boxes, and that's something that you've made a bunch of, and you sell them on the internet. You have one that you can show the camera, right?
Yes, I do. Which one?
Either one, honestly. She's got one that's got more erotic imagery on it. And
this is my personal box. This is the fourth seal of Jupiter. Beautiful. And I've actually studied to see, okay, what it means in Hebrew, what is the symbols. I have looked into the iconography to kind of get a more you know, deeper relationship with that particular spirit, and finding that there's like different flavors with each of the seals. It's not just a Venus. It's not just, you know, a Jupiterian or.
There's at least one side you didn't show us. Where is it?
All right, so I'll show all the sides.
Beautiful. Oh, I love that. And
all right, so this is Fortuna. No, obviously for the black cats for the 13th. That was just a motif I wanted to put. And this is one of the Pleiades. Cool. This is actually from the image that's described in Picatrix. And also another Pleiades.
Right. So one of the things that's really cool about those older magical manuscripts that I've always thought was really fascinating is how many different images and these strange descriptive you know, components of all of the different symbolic beings and so forth that are on them. So it's great that you're bringing some of those to life. Sometimes I feel like one of my sort of callings in life is to bring things into the world that have been on paper and lost sort of from the reality for a long time. And like you kind of have a similar thing going on with that. So people can buy those. Can you custom order them?
Yes. I would prefer to do divination first, because usually the boxes are for a goal. They're set for an intention. And because you're doing a relationship with a spirit, I have it that you do upkeep with it. So these are not beginners. This is like you have an established, you know, spiritual practice. That's who it's meant for.
So you're saying that you don't really want to just do one that someone just comes up with, oh, I'd like to get this. You want to have them already have done some work beforehand?
Yes. Yes.
Interesting. That's certainly going to limit your customer base, but it's a cool thing. So,
well, should I go into it, or as to why I?
Absolutely. That's why I'm talking to you.
All right. So I have done that just to kind of test it and see, and it was with great results. But then after a while, what I saw was ingratitude. And they thought it was a genie. They thought that like, oh, I can, you know, they were misusing it. And I don't like the misuse. And when you treat it like as, you know, like, hey, I could get 1 million wishes. No.
It seems like that's the way a lot of people have attitudes towards spirits these days. That seems to be the sort of the general attitude. Like, you know, if you believe in spirits at all, they're sort of an ever-flowing fountain of gifts and wishes for you, right? I mean, which is not.
Yeah, it doesn't work that way. No, they will. That's the thing. They will give you, like, if you are genuine and you are sincere, then yes, they will give you anything and everything that you ask for under the sun within, you know, reason. You know, that you work too. Yes.
Right. I mean, like, it seems to me that there are sort of 3 wishes in a lot of cases. Not necessarily that exact number, but there's a limit before it sort of starts getting like, hey, listen, buddy, I'm done. So what your sort of beliefs around spirits, do they come from your grandmother, or do they come more from your research later?
All of the above, from my grandmother,
above?
from my mother, from my experience with spirits.
Your grandmother?
I even brought my mother into, let's put it this way, when I first started doing the lesser and the greater key and going into Picatrix and such and making the circles, because I actually made these circles, I was in her backyard. I would take out the canvas and I would paint it, and she would, Mija, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm doing this. And she's like, you're going to need, she even gave me the rope. She gave me the stick, and she was like, you need to measure it this way. You're doing it wrong. And she would actually give me pointers.
So you're saying she had some experience doing that too
then? She experienced doing the craftsman and artistic side of it. As to practicing, no. Yeah. That became, I pulled her in on those sessions, and which was interesting for her. She actually, if she was still around, she'd probably say that they were really interesting, and she had interesting experiences with spirits. That's for sure.
Do you feel like sort of practicing various forms of Santeria or its varied flavors is something that's common amongst the Puerto Rican population? I'm curious, this is a personal question for me, because my grandmother's actually Puerto Rican and she died long before I was born, so I don't really know that much about my family, so I'm just curious what prevalence it has in the community.
I think it goes by house, family to family. Yeah. I think it's like, the same thing like you would say like for any aspect of Christianity, because there's different, flavors of Christianity, like your Methodist, Baptist, so on and so forth, But
like, are people like, oh, that, when they're talking about your family, like, oh no, those are the people that are like doing that?
No, I never got any of that. Mostly was, my mom did, and I say this in other interviews as well, that when it came to talking this, it's only been recently been talking about this, and she did know about it. And she was like, my grandmother was very like, they were of the mindset of like, don't talk about it. It's a family secret. You don't show your underwear to everybody, like this is something the family does. Don't be a little, because that's the other thing that they used to tell me, like if you say whatever, that's giving away your ashe away, that's giving you your blessings, giving away your, why would you do that? And that's giving, bringing evil eye in, and there was so many things, and it has to also go with the culture as well in our community. Yeah. And because I always thought it was weird, like, well, why do I always have to say, everything is, anything in a negative light, because you don't want evil eye, for example. I don't know if I'm making myself clear on that.
No, what are you trying to say there? I always like to know tidbits about people.
Like, for example, like if you're just having small talk, oh, how's the family? Oh, we're doing fine. It's fine. But you don't go into it. Or, oh, I got this, and this problem. So this way you don't have being jealous of you or whatever. So that they will be.
I think I was secretly raised in that too, honestly. That not to really talk about what's going on in your family, not to like toot your horn or cry about the bad stuff, just sort of like, no, everything's great. Or fine, just okay. So how often do you find yourself actually like sort of, doing ritual magic at this point? Or is it, because it's interesting, because like you and I are both artists. And so for me, art and magic kind of merge with each other sometimes. And so sometimes I feel like I'm doing a lot of magic that a lot of people would say, no, you're just doing art right now.
No.
I mean? No. Some people might say the other way around.
No. Big elaborate rituals, yeah, they take some time and planning and so forth. But like for doing the actual timing for the sigils and creating the actual thing, like yes, it does involve planning and timing and getting the darn materials to get all together to do it in the first place. But yeah, this is one thing that I love in Picatrix. There's a line in it that says that creating, or the act of creation, is an act of violence. And it's an archaic term that I thought that was, because they have a different meaning to the word violence than we do today. And it was basically taking something that is in the natural world, making it unnatural, because
Right.
you were taking this thing, you were imprinting it, you were imbuing it, you were forcing the spirit of the thing that you are trying to manifest, that you're trying to call down, that you're trying to bring forth and push into this object that, you know, that it's like, it's, you know, you're calling on that spirit. You're having that connection. You are, you know,
And do you feel
that's
like
what I feel when I do that.
I was gonna say, do you feel really connected with the spirit when you're doing that, or do you feel like just the act itself is doing it, and your sort of consciousness isn't a component?
It starts immediately when you go to sit down and you do, well, for me, I do the meditation, I do a prayer, and I go, okay, you have to guide my hands on this. This is my intention for it, and then you get taken over. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. Because I think it goes into the whole thing. I think other magicians have expressed this. Not all ritual has to have like a sign or whatever. As long as the end result happens, then you're good.
Well, I mean,
but
I feel like that, like for me, if you're not entering into the spirit of it as much as possible, then you're not, you know, you're not the.
Oh, they let you know. They let you know. I'm here. I'm here. You're doing it wrong. You need to do this. I've gotten that. And even my own mother will come in and be like, you got to do that over. I'm like, why? What? You got to do it again.
Do you feel like you're okay? So, for instance, just as an example, on your box, you have a few things that I don't think have really been represented visually before. And I can't remember. Is it the 19th mansion of the moon that has the woman with the hands for?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you feel like, do you connect with that in a visionary state? For instance, like, you know, you go into a trance and you actually communicate with the entity, or do you feel like it just sort of like pops into your head and you let it down on
that spirit is the spirit of destruction, the spirit of miscarriage, the misery, and like, but the way that I felt with her was like, it's more of a dismantling than total destruction. It felt like taking down of the old. And yeah, she does have it does say in Picatrix, not the eyeball thing, but I was thinking more like Islam is the Islamic and then I realized
Fatima kind of thing.
And then I realized, oh darn, the whole, you know, Del Toro Pan's Labyrinth thing, and I was like,
you know, it's funny because
I was sincerely going for you know,
the hand of Fatima, the guardian. I actually thought the Fatima first, and then I thought Pan's Labyrinth later. So you succeeded with me as an audience member. That I got where you were going with it at first, and then I thought, oh, and it's kind of like that movie.
And it was interesting because I think during that time period when I had done that painting, I think even like Once Upon a Time, there was a bunch of shows, they were all doing it, and I was like, okay.
Well, it's still cool.
It's in the air. It's in the atmosphere. It's there.
Yeah, exactly. So, but what I was trying to get at with my question is, when you are first kind of conceiving how you're going to represent something that is specifically magical, do you try and have a vision of it? Do you try and, you know, sort of like, in Crowley's work, there's, you know, you take a symbol and you kind of go through it and you have a vision of whatever's on the other side of that, you know, the curtain that has the being or the symbol for it. I mean, do you ever do things like that, or does it just sort of come to you naturally and you're just like, okay, I get it. I get where I'm going with this? Or...
It's various ways. It could be either, like, again, strictly from the actual writing, which is like, let's say Picatrix, to me meditating. But most of the times, even if I go with, I already have an idea, I'm going to go with this image. I'm going to go with what I have in my head. I will have a dream, like, for example, Venus. Venus, for some reason, I have a really, which is interesting because my Venus is in detriment. She's in fail, but I have a good relationship with her.
Maybe that's part of the healing process, is a lot of time with her.
I've seen different aspects of her. I've seen her as a parrot, where she was sassy and she was a smart aleck. And like, for example, because I had asked a question, I think, to another magician saying, hey, when I consecrate this, should I do this at this, should I wait for this time period or whatever? The spirit herself came to me and said, listen, and she was talking like a parrot, you know, she was beautiful green, had all these wonderful feathers, she was gorgeous. And I was just so entranced by her in the dream. And she was like, listen, I'm hungry now. You got to feed me now. I'm not waiting until you to put it. When she put it into those terms, I'm like, oh, okay. gotcha. Oh, I'm thinking, no, she's like, no, yeah. She's like, I want this. Can you, yeah, thank you. So that was one instance. Another one where I had an issue with a client that it was, I think, for a love spell, and supposedly he did everything. I asked her the question, and a different version of her. She was dressed in armor. She looked like Joan of Arc, which I thought was the weirdest thing. And she had a helmet and everything. And she took her helmet off, and we were in front of a campfire. This is in the vision, the dream. And she's like, listen, this is what's going on with your client. I need rations for my troops. This is the way she put it to me. She's like, I need rations for my troops to go to war. I need, ammunition. I need this, this, and this. He's not providing the energy to do that. He's not giving any offerings. He's not giving anything. I'm stuck here with my troops, and we're here at this. We're not doing anything. I'm like, oh, gotcha. Okay. She's like, so I get things like that where they show me how they look, and I will present them as such. That one I thought was interesting, that she came to me dressed up in armor.
Does that usually then become art for you, or is it just something that is a vision and that remains, as a part of the
majority of the stuff that I have to write it down? It's in sketchbooks, it's in journals. I put it down and I put a notation as well.
But like for that client, did you then give him an image of that armored being?
Yes, because it was on he had his own personal spirit box.
Oh, okay.
And I said, hey.
So the spirit box creation process for you may involve you having a dream and putting something in together.
Because there's prep work involved. It's like, again, I have to do the divination. I have to ask the spirit. I have to see if what you're asking is, there is footwork here. I don't just willingly, there is a relationship. And then when I'm done with it and I hand it to you, is your job to upkeep with it and continue that relationship.
Now, if that spirit box is for a specific purpose, what should your client do with it once that purpose is no longer there? Is there a way to evolve the box past that singular purpose, or should they destroy it or bury it, or how do you manage the?
My mother was in the school of destroying it.
Yeah.
Me, because I worked hard on it as an artist, and my heart and everything.
That's where I'm getting at. It's a beautiful box,
And I would look at her like, and she'd be like, no, it served its purpose. It's done. They should just use it to continue the upkeep if they want to. And that was her. And I felt, at least I agreed with the latter, not the first. Because she was like, no, it's done. They need to burn it.
There's an artist and filmmaker. His name is Harry. Oh gosh, I don't know. It's escaping me right now. But he was a member of the OTO, I believe. And he used to make films in which he would like carefully hand draw all the frames onto the film, and then he'd roll it down the street and destroy it. So like most of the stuff gone. So yeah, I mean that is a magical act that people will sometimes do. Do you find that most of your art that is magical in format ends up being sort of practical towards a particular kind of like agenda, or do some people just sort of want a worship object kind of magical object from you?
Again, depends on what they're asking for. If they're asking for more like general love versus like a target, and I don't do targets. I used to way back, and I realized very quickly, no.
I'm using the word target more generally, Manny. I'm meaning more like there's a specific, like there's a difference between having a statue of Venus that you kind of, or a box,
venerate,
or a picture or whatever of Venus that is generally an object that you venerate, as opposed to having one that is specifically made to bring love into your life. Those are two different conceptual things. Are most clients looking for something more specific, or is it?
It looks like both, but usually it's specific. Usually it's to bring more love, more money, prosperity. There was a few for health. I was that one was interesting and challenging. I really enjoyed that. And I did even one for myself for that as well, because that really intrigued me. This one this is my personal one. This is the one that I don't just treat it just for veneration, because I do have a relationship with the spirit Bariel. And I also know him as the Archangel Baraquiel, who I think is, I forget if it's the 5th or the 9th lunar mansion. He's the one where it's the eunuch that's sitting pot-bellied, and I think he's also doing the eye covering as well, where he's holding. So I work with both sides of that spirit because he goes both, which I don't know. I thought that was interesting. That why would a spirit of disease also be a spirit of prosperity? So
you had a parrot and a warrioress. So I mean, there's all kinds of directions things can go, right?
ancient meanings that have been lost to time that we don't know as modern minds today, and we're only scratching the surface.
I think we often, I mean, and it really goes back to the time period that the books that you and I have been talking about, the Picatrix and all of those, they're starting to try and codify stuff that was much more sort of random and loose before then. So I mean, we for several hundred years we've been trying to make it simpler and more clear and more obvious. Venus is for this, Jupiter is for this, and today people's views are very narrow on those things. But if you look back, the further back you look, the wider the meanings of things are, and the more sort of, I mean, like we were talking about the PGM for a couple of minutes earlier before we were recording. In that book, I mean, there aren't even that many entities, specific ones in there, and they do all kinds of things. Hecate does everything from love to destruction to all sorts of different aspects of what her essence might be, and same for Typhon and the other sort of commonly mentioned ones in there. They seem to be sort of like you could almost utilize them for any different thing. It's more what you are aiming at and what you're focusing upon. So back to the question that I didn't ask, but that you started to answer, which is doing specific things targeted at somebody. You don't like to focus on someone having a really specific, I want Fred to fall in love with me. That's not that you like to be a part of, or?
Because there's so many variables. There's what we could talk ad nauseum. I'm sure the other magicians have gone over this a million times, whys and why not.
But I'm interested in your opinion. You're making these spirit boxes, which are cool. So for me, it's mostly about gratitude and and working on the self. I feel like most people have to do a lot of work on themselves, because they find like the other thing is like you get your wish and you're like, now what? Are you happier when you were before, right,
versus after? That's something you have to see within yourself. And that's the other thing I look with the divination and looking into what's going on with the person's life and going, okay, this is what you actually need. This is the thing that you're trying to accomplish. Let's focus on this, and we'll see how we can kind of, do an overall effect here. And I want them to have a relationship with that spirit because they can lead to other things and they could expand their practice.
And do you do readings for people that don't have to do with this, with your art projects or your magical art projects?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you do that at a store, or do you do that through the internet? How do people connect with you?
People used to get a hold of me at Original Botanica, but because of the pandemic and obviously a lot of stuff that was going on, now everything is, digital, virtual, and such.
So if someone contacts you through one of the links that I'm going to give them,
they can totally book a reading. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. And so, is it improper for me to ask how much it costs to get one of your spirit boxes, or? No,
the usual starting price is like $250, because it has to cover for the wood, the labor, and such. But if the bigger it is,
that's more than
it's going to be more.
I would charge much more than that, personally.
Like this one, for example, because it's Purple Heart and it's super, super heavy.
You make the box too?
No, I have. His name is Joshua Martin. He is a sweetheart. He is my carpenter, and Alex. These are not boxes from. Just to be clear, these are not boxes from like Michael's. These are handmade boxes of different kinds of heart. I'm a carpenter that actually did the timing. Did it on a specific day, got special, the wood on a certain, yes, absolutely. Fantastic. And we're looking to be eco-friendly and not, we're very conscious of certain things, because we want to do our part as well and not abuse the system, as it were. So yes. Well, I think you may be undercharging for your boxes. Well, like this one, for example, this one is like between $500 to $600 because it's the Purple Heart.
Still, beautiful artwork. Each side is its own painting. So that's 6 paintings, right? Or do you not always do all the sides?
No, all the it depends, because again, if they're going to have woodwork, because I had one where I think one client wanted nothing, but I was like, they have to be in the same family, because we're not going to call it, we're not doing this thing of like, oh, let's call it Legua and, you know,
Right.
well, some wicking no. No, we're staying within the family here of practice. So that's the other thing that I put a disclaimer on, that I keep things in their compartments.
What if someone wants something from the Greek magical papyri that does have a lot of stuff that's, you know, mix and match from different pantheons?
But that's traditional. Well, we know that is traditional, but we're talking about like the ATRs and such, and I know that there's been controversy about it and such, and others will chime in on that as well. For my most part, I try to keep everything, you know, because I was taught certain spirits don't play with others.
Sure.
That's disrespectful. That's another thing. And some are hot, some are cold, some are chthonic, some are celestial. Why would you do that? You know, it's like.
I mean, it makes sense, especially if you're going to be doing a bunch of divination. Then you can certainly suss that out as well. But before we come close to ending here, I know that we both have time limits here, but I want to talk to you a little about some of your other stuff, because you also do 2 comic books. Is that correct?
I have one comic series, and I have a one-off that I'm doing because I want to just do a quick, you know, issue. There's trades and then there's issues. The one that I'm aiming for it to be a trade is the Orphany comic, and then the one that I'm doing it just as for fun is the Fox that Stole Hearts. That's the working title. I haven't really thought of what a better title than that, but to kind of go into what the Fox one is about, is basically about this fox spirit that you know, we kind of know them to be promiscuous and mischievous and doing all sorts of things. And this particular one, he's a very young fox spirit. He messed with the wrong witch or wrong deity or whatever. It doesn't go into, I won't go into, because I want to show versus tell. Sure. And he basically, you see in the first scene, I have it on my Instagram, that the first scenes where he's calling down Khonsu, the Egyptian god of the moon, and who was known for exorcisms, known for getting rid of, you know, disease and any ailments or comas and such, because like this is all the literature that we have. And I have him that he's calling him in a PGM right, because I've actually done the Helios right. So I have it seen like in the shots what he's doing, and he calls down the Egyptian god, and the whole thing is for him to remove this curse that's been put on him. And he goes into how he got the curse, why he has the curse, and the problem with getting it off of him, and what is the curse that he has, which is basically that he has this because he was a heartbreaker, he now is forced to eat hearts. So if he has some sort of attachment to a person, he will eventually have to eat them. Eat
their heart? Cool.
He would actually have to gorge on their organs. Yeah.
I definitely, I want to just mention to the audience here that this afternoon when I was talking to Manny about what we were going to talk about in this, she was like, well, I mean, I do these comic books, but they're not really occult. And I can't tell you that there's any part of that is not pretty occult. I know that you get creative with it, but that's fine. You know, that's part of the magic of storytelling, right?
Because there's 2 sides of me. There's, you know, academic Manny, and then there's creative Manny. And I figured, like, okay, that is fictional, and this is actual, like, by the book, historic. You know,
sure.
They're 2 separate things. And when I hear about like Dark Song or what was the other one that this guy summoned a goetic demon that turned out to be his girlfriend? I mean, there've been movies like this. Hereditary was another one, and so forth. So you hear like what, you know, those magicians, you know, we laugh about it, and we poke at the holes and all the anachronisms and things that are, you know, right or wrong about it. Sure. So I start thinking that, and I'm like, you know, let's leave it there. It doesn't have to go
in
here.
your creative world. But I mean, still, I feel like all those movies that you just mentioned are all ones that occultists love to watch, because we like to see magic, because it's it's part of our lives.
It's so rare.
We like to make fun of it when it's wrong or whatever, but we also like to watch it even though we like to make fun of it, because we like to see the magic in there. And it seems like you're bringing a lot of magic into the things that you're doing. You're bringing Greek magical papyri in. You're bringing the fox spirits and deity / witches. There's all kinds of cool things that I'm sure any occultist would love to sink their teeth into for a little while, to enjoy something that's a story, but that sort of speaks to their worldview as well. Now, I want to mention something that I don't remember if it was Kickstarter or Indiegogo, but I actually supported a movie that you were trying to make. Was that 2 or 3 years ago?
It was in 2018. It was in April. It was stressful for us because Jason had a heart attack at that time, and there was so many things going on for that project. It was just a stressful time. Then 2019, my mother died, and now with the pandemic. So everything has gone. The reason why I mention all this is because it's gone on the back burner for that. I do want so badly to go back on that project.
Okay, I was going to say, is that going to come back to life?
Yes,
because I thought it seemed pretty cool, and just in case this is watched by a bunch of people, I don't know if it will be or not, but tell us a little bit about that project so that people can get excited for the next time that you're trying to raise money for it.
All right. So the premise of that Kickstarter was for a short animated film. I wanted to do kind of like a PBS kind of special, talking about like a little snippet in the life of Lovecraft with Frank Belnapius Long. That was his best friend. And Frank Long, he did a memoir called The Dark Side, and he talks about his friend, and they actually have a dialogue. And I took that dialogue and I made it into a 5-minute script of that conversation that they had in Onset, Massachusetts, talking about everything from topics of Houdini to supernatural and the occult, and why he doesn't believe in it, and the charlatan tree. And he was like, wow, you took that. For example, Frank said to HP, he was like, wow, you really, when you had that conversation with Harry Houdini in New York, you really took it to heart. And he was like, absolutely. There was these intellectuals of the time having these discussions, because we are talking about a time period where spiritualism was at its height. They were scamming people. New York City had passed laws, especially when it came to doing seances and even tarot readers, because a lot of people, especially with Houdini himself, his mother had died, and he felt really, bereft from that. He was still in the grieving process, and he felt that people were taking advantage of that, of people that were hurting. So
of course, Harry Houdini made a fortune from being, a skeptic who, went around exposing people and so forth, and built his reputation largely on it. I mean, he was most known as like an escape artist, but I mean, what people really remember him for at this point is being a skeptic. So.
The funny thing is, he actually was into the occult. He actually has books on the occult himself that he actually, I'm not sure if he dabbled or tried, but he does have, and I think it is on record. I think some of them are in the museum. I've gone to the 2 of the museums that were here in New York, and taken a look there, and it's kind of fascinating to see the collection as well. Yes, I research everything.
At some point on this interview show, I'm going to be talking to Jeff McBride, who is a stage magician who was also a Hermetic magician as well, and he has some fascinating information about sort of the amount of people who are sort of magicians and also magicians. Like, I know for a fact that Donald Michael Craig is a stage magician. He's done some stage magic, and Aaron Leach actually has done some stage magic as well, which I don't know if he tells people. So.
I did not know that about Aaron. I myself, this is like in my college years, I used to do cards inside of it. My brother just recently got into it again because of Chris Ramsey, another YouTuber, and does the puzzle boxes and everything. And yeah, it seems to be coming back, which is great. I think because of Neil Patrick Harris, he's kind of like promoting, because they're worried that it's going to be a dying art. No one's going to be interested, because we live in an age where it's like all the mysticism and all, it's kind of, we know how things are, we get it's a trick.
Yes, I mean, certainly there's little kids exposing almost every magic trick on YouTube at this point. But yeah, I like stage magic as well, and always have ever since I was a kid. So, Manny, it has been a real pleasure to talk to you. And what I want to give you the opportunity to do is to, I mean, you can say the websites, or if you want to, or just sort of list the different places and email them to me, and I'll make sure that they're available for people to look at. But so give us your kind of final spiel on what's going on in your life and how people can connect with you, and what you want to talk about.
All right. So across the board, it doesn't matter where on social media, it's all the same. It's Manny the Uncanny. That's M as in Mary, A, N as in Nancy, I, the Uncanny. And my website is also mannytheuncanny.com. And I also have links for there as well. And the projects that I'm working on specifically for myself, personal projects that I love, that I hold dear into my heart, just for fun, is the like I mentioned, the comic Orphany and the Fox Who Stole Hearts. Again, I do commissions. I've mentioned that I do tarot readings, of course, and the spirit boxes. And if you just need, I also do like body positivity portraits. So that's something that I give mostly for the ladies.
You're not going to make a body positivity portrait for me? So I failed to mention that. That was actually something that you mentioned in your bio, is that being empowering for women is actually something that's very important and informs your work. So
yes, and that means anyone. Because I have those in the in the gay and trans community, and and those who don't even ascribe to a gender. So I work on that energy, that especially we kind of like in this world where it's okay to be masculine, and where everything has been masculinized. Let's just call for that particular energy. And to be feminine is considered is weak, or there's something wrong or inferior about it. And I hope to kind of facilitate healing on that part.
I also think creative or artistic or unusual. Those are all things that are sort of relegated to the side, as opposed to sort of that toxic masculine, achievement. So I think you and I are fairly representative of all the things that are not celebrated in our culture enough. So I'm glad that we've got a chance to talk. I also want to mention that you said that you have talismans that aren't boxes as well, that you also do, right? Is that correct? So
correct.
So someone could get just a talisman that's not a box. And what do you charge for something like that? Is it the same thing? I know it has probably a similar process still involved.
If they're wooden, and again, I mentioned the materials, and I think this has also been discussed by other magicians as well, depending on the material. It's not really important, but like the imbuement of it, like the power of it. Like I know paper talismans last, a month or two. Wooden ones will last for like between 5 to 6 months. Metal ones up to a year. That is if you continuously consecrating and upkeeping with it. So those are the ones that I work with. If the metal ones, I do kind of etch and burn. I have the diamond tip drill, and I've done those as well. I've done again the woodworking ones, but they're like this. And for those ones, I usually have them for more like for earth elementals and air elementals, because they're going to be put in the house. They're going to be put for certain things. And the only time that I've done a metal one, and this was for a personal reason, this was for my mother because she had back problems. I did a Mars talisman, and I had that put under her bed, so this way that her back would heal. So I did that for her spine. So like those, that one I think I did in iron. So yeah, so for something like for that size would be like 200 or 300. For depending on the material, again, if it's the wooden ones, it'd be like 150 to 100. It's not that expensive.
Okay. And I just want to emphasize that Manny is not being a huckster. I asked her those questions for the I don't want people to think that you're like slinging it. You're just you're answering my questions, and I appreciate it. Some people are funny about that kind of stuff. So Anyway, Manny, it has been such a pleasure to talk to you, and I hope that we can do it again sometime in the future. And
yes, definitely. I enjoyed this.
Other topics to talk about, I'm sure, as things move forward. And I really do hope that you get your film done. I'm excited to see it. I was. I mean, it doesn't seem like it's not like it's a you know.
It's a matter of time, animators, and money. I just need to get everybody together. It's like, I think one person in the animation industry, it's like herding cats together to get them to do something.
You got to have the resources to pay them so that they'll show up and sit there and do it.
And I can only do so much. I am an animator myself, but there's like so much I can do while also being a mom and taking care of everything else and orders and such.
That's 24 pictures for every second of film. So, I mean, that's a lot, right? Or 12 most of the time, right? They shrink it down. Am I right? That's 12 rather than 24?
It's okay. So, because I know that they've changed things, especially with
digital. Yeah. So it's 30 is now the standard. Yeah. So is that 15 frames a second then?
Usually because the reason why I'm having a hard time answering this is because most of it now, I used to remember because we had to draw it by hand, like on paper and everything, and we had to do it in the lunchbox and all this. Now everything is digital, and everything's kind of like set up from I don't even have to think about or worry about that anymore because I get the setup from the files from
and stuff like that. Yeah, I've never actually
from the company.
I've never actually done an animation on computers. I used to work with film when I was young, so it's like
So you mentioned because we did this as remember I went to SVA, so one of our first classes was that we had to paint every single that I remember being like I was upset with my professor, and then he was like, you have to edit it on the editing machine and splice it together, and and I was like, now I know why Kubrick did those many takes. Everyone's like beating him about the whole thing. I watched a documentary recently about like why he took X amount of takes, and I'm like, if you actually sat down to actually look through your footage and splice it by hand versus it's nice and digital now.
It's a different world. Although you can't really do the art project that you were talking about as well anymore without having film, because you can't. I mean, you can, but it wouldn't be the same thing because you're not. I mean, what she's talking about is film is in a strip, and so you actually just draw on each frame of the film in the strip and develop an animation that way, and that's an interesting project to do that no one's ever going to do again, most likely. Except maybe like there'll be some sort of archaeological. Oh, we're doing old-fashioned film
or something at the Met or MoMA, like where they're showing the old. I wouldn't say 20s because that's too late. More like 1900s, late 18, like where the footage is obviously still silent, but I think they still have a few. I'm trying to remember the name of it that I'm seeing repeatedly where one of the women is a ghost, and she's like bothering her lover in bed, waking him up, whispering in his ear. That was painted on.